Hi, welcome to another episode of You're Hired. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein. You're listening to 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. Today, we are doing a really interesting show, kind of futuristic show, about data and work, and really the analysis of data and all the news sources and pools of data that are available to people to do things with. So with me today, I've got Dr. Jennifer Golbeck. Am I pronouncing that right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
I met Jennifer about a year or so ago. Maybe it was 2 years ago?
It was a while,
2 years
yeah.
ago. 2 years ago at a conference, she was giving this talk. It was super fascinating. She showed a postcard called the Target Baby Postcard.
Yeah.
And the Target Baby Postcard it's a regular mailer postcard that people were getting who were pregnant, and Target sent it out to them if they believed that they were pregnant. And on the front, it had the picture of a woman, and on the baby bump, there was the Target logo. And on the other side, it was kind of like, hey, you're going to be a mom soon. Come and start buying your stuff at Target. And they did that because they knew if they got women coming in early, that they became customers for life. So the story goes that this young lady, 15
yeah.
years old, got this postcard, and her father absolutely flipped out, called the local Target, complaining to the manager, not realizing that it came from probably like a mailing house someplace in the middle of the country. And what he found out was that, in fact, his daughter was pregnant.
That's right. Target figured it out before she had told her parents.
So how did that happen?
Yeah, so Target, if you think about this, and I'm sure all the
you
examples...
know what? I'm sorry. I didn't even introduce you properly. I didn't give her a proper introduction. How casual and lazy of me. So Dr. Jennifer Golbeck is a leader in social media research and science communication. Right now, she is teaching at the University of Maryland. She began studying social media on the web 10 years ago. She's a pioneer in the field of social data analytics, which is discovering people's hidden attributes, and I'm going to say intentions.
Yeah, also intentions, yeah.
From their online behavior. And she's a leader in creating human-friendly security and privacy systems. So right now is associate professor at University of Maryland. So let's get back to the story. How did they know that this young lady was pregnant?
Yeah, so all of these examples require you to have big data, right? Data from hundreds of thousands, millions of people. And Target has that with your purchase history. So every time
So big data, we hear that word.
Yeah.
What does it mean now?
So, I mean, it's a good question, right? We're still debating it. Generally, the way that we think about it, those of us who do research on it, is data where you have so much that you can't fit it on your computer.
Okay.
You have to have some really big storage facility or cloud.
So is that like terabytes of data?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay.
And you can, some of this will actually work with much smaller amounts of data that you can fit on your computer, but generally we're talking about, terabytes and going up from there.
And then I see the concept of big data is kind of like data from lots of different places that are kind of like little tiny crumbs that maybe in of themselves, they don't make sense. But when you put them together, it paints a picture.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's important because there is all this data being collected, whether it's on social media, financial data, health records, right? Huge amounts of information. But by itself, it's just this pile and you can't do anything with it. And so a lot of what computer scientists like me do is figure out ways that we can extract something interesting from all that data. So in the example you're talking about, Target has everybody's history of everything they've purchased, right? They can match that if you use the same credit cards or if you have a loyalty card. And
I think that's why they have loyalty cards.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, every place that has a loyalty card is just so they can track.
Yeah, they don't really care about your loyalty.
Yeah, and in this case, you're absolutely right. It's hard to get people to change their purchasing habits, except at a few points in their life, and when they have a kid is one of them. So Target obviously wants to know this. Okay, it's really easy to tell from someone's purchase history when they had a baby, right? They start buying formula and diapers, all this stuff. So you go back 6-7 months, see what they were buying then, and that helps you figure out if a woman's pregnant. And not only can they tell if you're pregnant with really good accuracy, but they can pretty well pinpoint your due date.
Really?
Just by looking at, when do you start buying that stuff that women buy early on?
Yeah. And that's because, and we'll continue with the story, but that's because they're looking at millions of women shopping for this stuff over years.
That's right. Yeah.
Over like the entire country.
That's right. They can spread it out. If they think it's different, say, if you're in the Southeast, your patterns may be different than the Northwest. They can separate that out. But for something like pregnancy, it's likely pretty consistent. So they have basically every Target customer for the history of their life that they've been buying at Target, which is millions of people's data.
Right. And so how it works, and this is what you explained to me, is that they build this thing called a key. And a key is that they look at all these women's purchases over time, and then they just watch, and then they see who became pregnant or who became a mom, right?
That's right.
And I guess they validate that because then they start buying diapers and formula.
That's how they can tell.
Right.
Yep.
And so then they go back and they look at what they bought. And
right.
And so there are these three things, right?
There's three things. So they actually talked. So this story is in a New York Times article from probably like 5 years ago. And the Times talked to a guy at Target who worked on this team. And he said, yeah, one of the ways we can tell, one of these early signs of pregnancy is if a woman buys an extra bottle of lotion, a handbag that's big enough to double as a diaper bag, but not an actual diaper bag, right? Just like a big purse, and brightly colored rugs.
Did you say red rugs or brightly colored? Because
brightly colored. So I think I use blue as my play example in the talk, but any bright color, which is, that one doesn't make sense. Like the lotion, I understand, maybe the handbag, but you're not decorating a nursery when you're 8 weeks pregnant, right? I don't know why the rugs are in there, but we don't care about the why. All we care is that combination of things, for some reason, is very rare in the general population, but it's more common among pregnant women. And so it's one of many signals that can help you figure out if someone's pregnant.
Now, do you think now that they've kind of released this, that people are trying to hack it and just going in there and buying these things together?
Yeah, that's always a question, especially in the social media space where we can also find these signals of things you do and things you like. People manipulate it all the time. Turns out it doesn't matter, because if people all of a sudden say, all right, I'm going to go buy lotion, handbag, brightly colored rug, and millions of people were to do this, say, well, they can just rerun their model. That combination won't be predictive anymore, but other stuff will be.
Right.
So it's really hard to trick these algorithms or get away, even if you find out what those internal insights are.
And it's hard because you're looking at lots of people, right? And lots of people, you can't change the behavior of lots of people all at once as well.
Yeah,
I
that's
imagine
right.
hey, let's all do this.
Yeah. No, that's right. It would be really hard to coordinate something like that.
Yeah.
But on top of that, the things that end up being predictive, in this case, the rugs, the purse, the lotion, like that combination, like you would never logically figure that out.
Right.
And so if they report it, okay, then you can do something. But generally, they're not reporting these things, right? And so there's no way for you to guess, because the combinations, these are statistical connections. They're often there because there's these really complex social processes going on under the scenes that we can't observe, but artifacts of those other things that are going on kind of surface in your purchase history. Well, that we can detect statistically. We don't understand why. It might change, but it makes it really hard for you to avoid it because there's not this clear, obvious connection if you buy a pregnancy test, they'll guess that you're pregnant.
Right.
That's not what they use to guess.
And then you did something really interesting, which I thought it was totally fascinating, because I have people in my life who suffered from postpartum depression, but you created this app on Twitter. Well, collected data from people's Twitter accounts, women's Twitter accounts. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is actually one of my colleagues, Munmunja Chowdhury, who's at Georgia Tech. This is her research.
Oh, okay.
What they did is they followed hundreds of women on Twitter over the course of their pregnancy. So they knew when they gave birth. They went back 9 months. They followed all of the tweets over the course of their pregnancy. And they kept track of all kinds of things. So they collected the text of the tweets, but also how often these women liked or replied to other people. So all their interactions on Twitter. And then once the women had their kids, they monitored them to see if they developed postpartum depression or not. And so this is, when we're building these algorithms, there's a few things that we need. And one of them is what we call ground truth, the real answer. So in this case, we're looking at postpartum depression. So we need to know these women definitely developed it and these women definitely didn't. We need that to build these algorithms. So they got that data, and then they went back and they found all these signals in the tweets and in the interaction behavior where the women who developed postpartum depression behaved in a very different way than the women who didn't early in their pregnancies.
Before they felt depressed.
Right, before they had their kids.
Yeah, before they had their kids. So it was kind of like just this thing going on in the background.
Yeah, and it turns out all women change their patterns of interaction over the course of their pregnancy, which makes sense, right? There's stuff going on in your life. You're going to behave differently.
Don't need science to know that.
Right. But the women who develop postpartum depression change in kind of divergent ways from those who don't. And again, it's really subtle stuff. So the women who develop postpartum depression increased the number of questions that they were asking on Twitter. Now, they didn't look at what those questions were. You can just detect a question pretty easily. And so that went up for the women who developed postpartum depression. It went down for the women who didn't. And there were similar changes in things like the parts of speech they use, first and third person pronouns, verbs and adverbs. We saw it in how quickly they responded and how often they replied or liked to other people's things. And so because there's all these different divergent patterns that we can detect, what they were able to do is basically look at your Twitter feed, and if you're a woman, on the day you give birth, they can run you through their algorithm and tell with about 80% accuracy if you'll develop postpartum depression or not, which I think is sort of amazing, right? Because it's the kind of thing where you can talk to your doctor about this. And postpartum depression is one of these really insidious conditions because you're a woman, you have a baby, you're supposed to be joyful and glowing and like embracing your motherhood. And for women who develop postpartum depression, like not only do they have the depression, but they feel like they're not supposed to be feeling that way, right? That they're wrong as a mother. And so it can be hard for a doctor to detect that because the women don't want to say, you know, I'm really having a hard time. I'm really unhappy all the time. So this algorithm gives you a way, before you have the baby, before you have any of those guilty feelings, for your doctor essentially to push a button and know if you need to be monitored for this or not, which is it's a condition that's treatable, but you have to detect it. So I think it's this beautiful example of how these kinds of algorithms that work on social data have real potential and applications in the healthcare space and other real world places to make a really big difference.
So just so people understand the whole story that you're told, which is great, what is postpartum depression?
Oh, yeah. So postpartum depression essentially is a depression that women develop after they have a baby. Usually takes a few weeks after you have the kid to really start setting in. And it can manifest in all kinds of ways. So it can feel kind of like a clinical depression where you're just unhappy all the time. It can result in really violent mood swings. It can result in, like, if you talk to women who are, you know, willing to be honest about those feelings of hating your baby, feeling like you made a mistake, like just wanting to run away from everything. The causes of it, you know, it's not super well known, but they suspect that it has to do with all the hormonal changes that come along with having a baby, plus, you know, all the life changes that come along with it too.
And how long does it usually last?
Well, it depends. You know, it depends how much it's treated. So it can be a couple months and it fades away. It can be a couple years and it fades away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how is it treated? Is it just like antidepressants?
Antidepressants can absolutely treat it.
But if it's treated early.
That's right. If you catch it early, right? So if you're starting to develop those feelings a few weeks in, they can give you the medication that's going to help level that out. If you don't get it treated and it doesn't start to go away on its own, it can lead into kind of a clinical depression or,
Just get worse.
Yeah.
Make everything worse.
That's right. It makes everything worse. And the women who go through it, some of them are like, I never want to have another kid again. Not because there's any problem with the kid, but just I don't want to have to endure that. So it can have a really serious impact on the mother's quality of life, but also, you know, your ability to raise a kid because you don't have the energy. You're not feeling the kind of feelings that you expect that you should. So yeah, it's a kind of insidious condition that's actually relatively common, but it's hard to detect.
How common? Do you know?
I don't actually know the full percentages, but it's not like a 0.5% kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, because there's this pressure to embrace your motherhood and, you know, not complain about it, it can be really hard to detect. So a lot of women have it and don't get any treatment for it.
Yeah, I believe Brooke Shields came out with saying she had postpartum depression.
Yeah, that's
during
right.
her pregnancy, and it was difficult. Wow, that's the, you know, the first was kind of the commercial aspects of data analysis, and the second was a great social benefit.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and so if just to bookend that one, is that if a woman wanted to get that or figure out her data, like how does that happen? Yeah,
I don't know if they have actually put that out as a tool you can use at this point. So it's worth checking. Georgia Tech is where that work took place, and Munmunda Chowdhury is the author. So if you just Google her first name, M-U-N, you'll find it. I'm not sure if they've released that so, you know, the general public can use it or not.
Sure, but it's definitely worth investigating.
Yeah, and the paper is fascinating and worth reading.
Cool. Well, I think it's really interesting to get those examples of this notion of big data, right? Like you said, all the things we do track data, all the things I do on my phone with my car.
Everything.
The Tesla car actually sends data back to Elon Musk about how it was operated.
Yeah,
like
that's
on a
right.
regular basis, so they can see how people are using the car, which is kind of creepy. I've heard stories of companies tracking your Fitbit.
Oh, yeah. Insurance companies love to track your Fitbit.
Right, so they know how much exercise you're getting or when you're getting exercise or how you're sleeping.
Yeah.
So since we're a show about jobs and careers,
Yeah.
we try to do that. How is this going to affect the workplace? How can companies use it for the benefit? And what do people have to watch out for?
Yeah, it's such a big question. There's so many answers. So
We got like another 40 minutes.
Yeah, good. So, I think, one, how are companies going to use this? I talked to a lot of groups that do hiring about this kind of research, and there's a few interesting applications. So one is that there's typical kinds of tests and surveys that some companies would give, things like personality tests, these kind of surveys that test how well do you work in teams, what's your likelihood of staying at the company. Those kind of things we're pretty good at inferring from your social media data that's public on the web, whether it's Twitter or Facebook.
Right.
LinkedIn is a little more closed off.
I find using some of those tools, some of them are pretty accurate because they're hard to figure out what the right answer is.
Yeah.
But some of them are so easy to I know what the right answer is and I can think it through.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about is different.
Yeah, that's right. So you could take those tests, right, and kind of give the answers that you think they want to hear. But since we can now infer the score you would get on that from your social media data, I don't have to give you the test anymore, right? Which means you can't lie on it. Maybe if everybody who took the test for the researchers lied, then we'd predict what you were going to lie about. But it's a researcher, so we don't care what answers you give. And that means that I can look at all your data and come up with a pretty good guess of what your scores would be, which means I don't have to give you the test. When you apply, I could go look it up.
Right.
Now, I don't know that any companies are doing that yet, but a lot of them are talking about starting to do that.
And then we're talking about looking at social media data. There's lots of social media data.
Oh, yeah.
But I know that you have a Twitter fat pipe. That's what it's called?
Yeah.
Right.
We call it so there's the garden hose, which is little, and the fire hose, which is big.
Right. And it's a special access.
So it's basically paid for access to about 10% of all the stuff that goes on Twitter. But if we know a person, so if I want to look up you, well, I can get all of your data with no special access.
Right. So if you know me and say 1,000 other people, you can kind of monitor their Twitter for the beginning?
Yeah, depending on how much work you want to do. So it's really easy to go back about 3,500 tweets with a little more work. Yeah, I can get everything. So we actually in my lab are doing a lot of work now analyzing Donald Trump, and we have every tweet that he's ever posted on Twitter.
For how long has he been on Twitter?
For a while. I have 5 or 6 years, probably.
Yeah. Any findings you want to share with us?
So here's an interesting one. So if you look at at the last year and a half, right, his campaign and then into his presidency, you can look at what device the tweets were posted from. Trump has posted up until very recently all of his tweets from an Android, but his campaign staff was posting from an iPhone. So you can look during the campaign and there's iPhone tweets that are like, oh, Wisconsin, it was great to see you in Madison today. Thanks for the rally. And then you can see Trump tweets. He's like, Hillary's a crooked liar and needs to go to jail, right? Like if you read them, you can tell they're posted by different people. Trump has since started posting from an iPhone, but we've built algorithms that can detect the language differences and the tone. So we can automatically tell what he's posting. He tends to be much angrier than his staff, right? The staff posts kind of upbeat, positive things. Trump's tweets have a lot of negative emotion. They're designed to kind of spur anxiety and anger, where the staff posts much more positive things.
So you can give access to your Twitter feed to a bunch of people. I didn't actually know that, I guess.
Oh, yeah. If you're on Twitter, your tweets are either public, anybody can get them, there's no restrictions, or they're private and only the people who follow you can see them. And that's a pretty small percentage of Twitter users who have it private.
Right.
So we can get data essentially from anyone who's
But him and his staff can all publish to his
That's right.
Twitter account.
That's right.
Because you can just give them access.
Yeah.
If they have the password.
That's right. Just the password. So, I post from home on my computer a lot, but I post from my phone probably half the time. And you can see that in the metadata that you're able to pull about a tweet where it was posted.
Okay. So employers can see if their new staff are too crazy for them.
Yeah, that's right. And there's actually algorithms out there that you can run on yourself right now.
Really?
So I can give you some links to these.
Right now? Like, let's try one?
Sure, we can try one.
So we're here in the studio.
Live demo.
Live demo. I'm going to pull up my Twitter account. Okay, so I opened up Twitter, or do you need to open up an app?
Yeah, so if you just go, open up a web browser.
Okay, I got a browser here.
Yep, so if you go to a website called Analyze Words.
ANALY, Analyze Words.
I think .com.
Analyze Words in text?
Is that what it's showing you?
It's giving me all sorts of, but let's see. Analyze Words, personality analysis.
Yep, that's it.
From Twitter checks. Okay.
So just put your Twitter handle in there.
Okay.
And it is analyzewords.com.
So is it the one that I have now, or is it the one, because it changed? We changed the name of it.
Whatever the current one is, and it'll still be able to go back to the tweets from before the name change. But I think it only pulls the 200 most recent ones.
Okay, Your Hired Radio. For those of you who are following us, then I'm going to hit the Analyze Tweet button. Okay, so what does it say?
Yeah, so what you get here is a nice little bar graph that shows how you fare on a whole bunch of different measures. So for your emotional style...
I'm not reading it, so...
Yeah, I'm reading off your screen here.
Yeah.
So it says that you score pretty high for being upbeat. You score low for using words about worry or anxiety or depression. So that's good. You tend to have an upbeat Twitter feed. You score kind of average for having a plugged-in social style, being aware of what's going on.
That sounds about right.
For being personable in your social style, you score low. You score high for being arrogant and distant, and for using spacey Valley Girl language.
Wait, high for using spacey Valley Girl language?
That's what it says.
Really?
And then your thinking style scores very low for being analytic. It scores low for kind of a sensory thinking style, and average for being in the moment. Now, this is not necessarily what your personality is as an individual, but
it's how I'm
the language of...
Yeah. So I think, so I'm going to look at some of these things, and I think most of what you said is probably true in context. Right. So in the moment, most of my tweets are about my show, which are things that happened previously. Like, I don't use Twitter like I do Facebook.
Right.
Like last night at 12 o'clock in the morning, I posted, I'm stuck on the tarmac, in San Francisco. That was in the moment.
Yeah.
And this morning I woke up like, hey, I had 5 hours of sleep and I got 4 shows to do. But I don't do that on Twitter.
That's right.
But
yeah. So you use them differently.
Yeah, this is really cool. Oh, and it says tweets analyzed from Your Hired Radio. And yeah, it just looks at the last bunch of tweets from different...
I think it's 200. Yeah, and if I pulled mine up at the same time, so I tweet a lot about science and research and statistics, and so my thinking style shows up really high for being analytic, because everything I talk about is, really analytical on there. So
I can analyze a friend too. There's a little button there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can put in, it'll pull a list of people that you follow, and you can put them in. But you can put anybody's Twitter name in there. You don't have to just do yourself. So
right.
Analyze your pals.
Well, so we had Amanda Augustine on from Top Resume, and what does it say about her?
Job search Amanda. She scores low for being upbeat. She has a very high plugged-in style, and like you, also scores high for being arrogant or distant and spacey. Her sensory thinking style is low, but she's average for being analytic and also in the moment. So she's
Amanda,
pretty similar to you.
We love you. Just want you to know that you're awesome. You were great on the show. So just we're not trying to hammer you or anything, but that's interesting.
And so, you mentioned that what you do on Twitter is different. If you want to look at your Facebook profile, there's a site called Apply Magic Sauce, which is a weird name.
This is fun.
This is academic research out of Cambridge. If you've watched my TED Talk about curly fries, the curly fries example comes from this research group. So this is their results.
Apply Magic Sauce. So you go to Apply Magic Sauce.
And then it's going to ask you to log in with Facebook. They're researchers, so they will not sell your data.
Predict my profile.
Yep. It's safe to share your info with them.
Okay, connect with Facebook.
Yep.
Which one? The Twitter psychology? I guess the Facebook psychology. So
try the Facebook one. Yeah, I haven't looked at their Twitter one.
I log in. So it's got, okay. I don't know why the password's not coming up automatically.
Yeah, so just while you're doing this for your listeners, so you're going to connect to them, and what they're going to grab is your likes and some other profile data, and it uses it to predict all kinds of things about you, things like your intelligence level, your personality traits, your political leanings.
It's not letting me log in. It doesn't match the account. Oh, I know why. I changed my email address for my...
And if you're doing this from your desktop computer, you're probably logged into Facebook already anyway. And so it's really just a matter of clicking the login with Facebook button, and it's going to grab all of your data, send it over to Cambridge where they will keep it protected. And then it's going to show you all the inferences that it can make about you. And, like we saw with the others.
It looks like you haven't logged on from this browser before. Please enter the login code from your code generator below. Where do I see my code generator?
The code generator is probably like your two-factor authentication. So it might email you a code. It might text you a code.
Oh, this is getting complicated. I'm having trouble. There's a button that says having trouble. I can't find my code generator.
And this is a Facebook thing that you're looking at here.
Open the Facebook app on your phone. Tap the menu button. Okay, so I'm opening the Facebook on my phone. I'm tapping the menu button. And then what was the next thing I had to do? I think it's on here somewhere. Wow, we're having a really good time here on the show. Kind of ignoring our guests. Okay, I think it's... here we go, code generator. Okay, remember this number. I shall write it down.
It's one time, so even if you set it on air, people won't be able to sneak in with your data.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so it's a 6-digit number. Okay. Submit code. Save browser? I guess what the hell, why not? All right. Continue as Lorne. Yes. And now it's going off into the internet and churning away. Well, okay. Well, where is it?
And so once you're here, you're gonna click. You're connected with Facebook, and then you're gonna click Make Prediction.
Okay.
And here it's gonna grab a whole bunch of your Facebook data, and you get a little spinner.
Okay. The following prediction is based on 201 Facebook likes, from which 30 were used, and it says psychological gender. Your digital footprint is fairly androgynous. It suggests you're probably female, but you don't express your masculine side.
And I got the opposite. I got androgynous that thinks I'm male.
These likes make you appear more masculine. Ted, I don't even know what these are. And some feminine. My big 5 personality. So is this right? Should I just read this?
That's right.
Why don't you read it and you can interpret it for us?
Sure. So if you've done like a Myers-Briggs, that's like the INTJ kind of thing. Sure. So this is similar. So it says that you score pretty well for openness, which is being open to new experiences. So you're on the open side of things. You score lower on conscientiousness, which would suggest you're a procrastinator as opposed to like a list maker who gets everything done on time. Is that right?
I think I'm actually I've become more of a list maker in the later part of my life.
Interesting. So on Facebook, you look like more of a procrastinator.
Yeah. I mean, I have this radio show.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, there's a lot to do.
You score as introverted, though not a lot, kind of close to the middle, but a little more on the introverted side. Right in the middle in terms of agreeableness. So you'll kind of have an argument, but not like forever. And you score low on neuroticism, which would suggest that you're kind of laid back as opposed to like getting anxious and worried about stuff all the time.
Yeah, that's all probably true.
I'd
say it's all true.
If we scroll down to the intelligence, you score average. You get a 49, where 100 would be like total genius level.
So I'm an average intelligence person. Now, okay, keep going.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask, like, how accurate is this?
So it depends on the trait. So for intelligence, they do pretty well. But I've seen it be super wrong for people. And, this is based a lot on your likes. And so in some cases, it can be way off, which is true for all these algorithms.
Now, wouldn't I like things? Like, I like a lot of what my friends say.
Yeah.
Just as like a way of like, I saw that. It's not like I like it.
Yeah. So this is more like the pages you like, right? So like you like the TED Radio Hour, you like VH1, like those kind of likes it uses. And it tends to use those more to see like these complex social things underneath, as opposed to like liking VH1 says this thing about you.
Right.
So if we're scrolling down, it says your life satisfaction is at 40%, which puts you on the sad face side of things. It can't predict that for me because I don't have enough data. You're just over 51% for leadership potential. But we got to this because you were asking about how companies might use this.
Yeah.
If they're hiring people, it would be really interesting to look up someone's leadership potential if you're hiring them for that kind of position.
Yeah.
Right. So for your political orientation, it thinks it has a 75% chance of guessing that you're liberal.
That's right.
And
there we go. I just blew out all my conservative audience.
So here for your religious orientation, so it has a bunch of religions and it's going to tell you how likely it thinks which one is. So the highest percentage is 45% for none.
For none?
For none, no religion. You get 30% for other Christian, 18% for Catholic, 3% for Jewish, 2% for Mormon, and 2% for Lutheran.
That's funny because I'm Jewish.
Yeah. So, you get 3% chance according to them, which is a great example of, where these just get it really wrong, right? Yeah. And I mean, you were telling me before the show that you were Jewish, so it's not like this is a quiet thing, right? Where you don't tell anybody.
So good entertainment value, clearly not particularly relevant for, or not so good for a job. I mean, I wouldn't, as someone in talent acquisition, I would not use that to tell me about somebody.
Yeah, I think the important thing with these kinds of algorithms, especially for hiring, and I go around and I tell people this a lot, is that these algorithms, like under the hood, the math of these algorithms is the same as what Netflix uses to recommend movies to you. It's the same as what Amazon uses to
and they're horrible
stuff.
at that.
And that's the thing, right? So we, as researchers, call these decision support systems. And that's really important. They're there to help support you making a decision, not to make the decision for you.
Hold on for a second. We're going to take a quick break. You've been listening to Your Hired Radio. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein. We're here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. We're going to take a quick break and be right back with our guest, Jen Golbeck. Hi, my name's Lorne Epstein, and every week at 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock on Mondays, I talk about jobs and careers and the workplace. We've done shows on pot in the workplace, the salary secrecy laws, and how to write a resume. I'm inviting you to come on our show. If you're interested or have show ideas, you can give me a call at 240-876-0276 or email me at lorne@electriccow.com. Or you can go to our webpage at lorneepstein.com or our Facebook page, which is also Lorne Epstein, and our Mixcloud account is, and you guessed it, Lorne Epstein at mixcloud.com. Hope to see you here on the show soon. If you want to sell more to HR and TA professionals, we can help you bring your brand into the ears of over 100,000 decision makers around the world. To advertise on this and other shows, contact us at lorne@lorneepstein.com. Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Lorne Epstein. You're listening to Your Hired Radio on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. We are talking to the Dr. Your parents must be so proud of you. Dr. Jennifer Golbeck, who is a research, what's your PhD in?
Computer science.
Research computer scientist at the University of Maryland. She's telling us about how we can use, or companies are going to use, big data, lots of data that's kind of disparate and not specific, to figure out if we're good people or not.
Essentially.
Whether we get voted off the island.
That's right. They can. But they shouldn't use just the big data. And this is the point that we were making before the break, that these kinds of algorithms, as we saw, right, in these examples we just went through, they're wrong part of the time. Sometimes 25% of the time, which is a big percent. Just like Netflix is wrong a lot of the time, Amazon is wrong a lot of the time. What I say when I talk about this is, like, if you think about Netflix or Amazon, like, most of the time it's right in a really uninsightful way, right? So like, oh, I bought the latest Stephen King book. Here's 10 more Stephen King books you might want to buy. Like, it's correct that I would like those, but I don't need the algorithm to tell me. About 20% of the time, depending on the algorithm, they're wrong, like in these really dramatic, terrible ways. I had Amazon last week recommended that I buy a container of mealworms, which I guess you feed to like pet lizards, which I don't have. I've never looked at any lizard related stuff. I don't know why it suggested it, but somehow like that pops up, right? Nice. Totally wrong. And then, about 10% of the time, maybe less, it's right like in this amazingly insightful way.
Yeah.
And so you may have seen that like, oh, Netflix recommends some movie, you've never heard of it, you watch it and it's like amazing, right? It's just what you want to see. That's how you need to think about these algorithms if you're thinking about hiring or whatever else, that most of the time they're going to tell you what you already know. Sometimes they're going to be wrong, but sometimes they'll give you this really interesting insight, and you want to treat them like that, just like you'd treat an Amazon recommendation or a Netflix recommendation. It's just one point that you use to help make the decision.
We had talked about how to actually collect the data. So in my field, talent acquisition, hiring people, I was just at a conference in San Francisco, HR Tech World, and there's a lot of software out there, and Watson was there, the IBM product. And what they do is, they'll scan resumes by the millions, and then they'll see, which of these people do you hire? And then they'll go back and create these keys to recommend folks. I don't believe it. I mean, I'm still a complete disbeliever, but that is what you did. That's what's done with some of these things.
Yeah.
And the numbers actually prove out. Like you were saying, what was the confidence, the percent of correctness for the postpartum depression?
About 80%, 80%.
That's very high.
That's right.
I mean, that's really good. Like if you can know something that's like 80%, I'd go with that.
Yeah. I think the issue is, like, this is not an uncommon feeling that you have, right? Like, I don't trust it. I don't believe it. I don't want to rely on it. And on one hand, like, that's the right way to be. You don't want to just rely on these and treat them as the truth. And in fact, it's a whole other show to talk about this, but there's a real problem when companies get these algorithms and kind of blindly use them. And there's a great book that came out last summer called Weapons of Math Destruction, MATH, Math Destruction, by Kathy O'Neill. She's a PhD in math, worked at a hedge fund, kind of left there to go work with Occupy Wall Street. And she wrote this really fascinating book that I didn't want to like when I first saw it because it's kind of a manifesto, which is not my thing. But it's very thoughtful and narrow in talking about when these algorithms are used in ways that are kind of opaque and systematically unfair. I think it's important that we're wary about that they're going to give us the wrong answers, that they're going to be unfair, that there's problems with them. So that book is a good thing to read to kind of help you think of those worries. But there's also this other issue of when it's appropriate, trusting the algorithms, right? Understanding they're going to be wrong part of the time, but trusting that overall they're giving you good insights. And that's something that we're working on. Part of why it's hard is because there's no internal logic that you get to see to help you confirm it, right? We just dump the data into this black box and it spits out an answer, and the answer is right 80% of the time. But we can't really explain those insides. When we try, it doesn't make any sense. And so you can't go, it made a decision because I did X, and X says I'm a good hire. And so then I trust the algorithm.
But could it be the questions that we're asking? Like, for instance, the postpartum depression one and the target baby one. Those are they different than like whether or not I hire my engineer Afotey, who I did interview, by the way?
Yeah. So the math is not different. The math underlying all of it is the same. It's just what.
But I mean, the kind of question, the context of the question, the desire, like they're basically the same.
It's basically the same. The only thing that differs is what data do you put in. So if you're putting in really bad data, you're going to get bad results. But so
a resume is bad data.
Well,
anybody who reads resumes knows that resumes are horrible. I've seen thousands upon thousands of resumes. They do not reflect the person. And
yeah.
Like I have seen resumes and then met the person and then been blown away on either side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in the resume is just kind of like, if there's something there that's interesting enough after reading so many, I can detect it. But I know that there have been times when I've missed on resumes where like I would put one off to the side and someone else would be like, oh, this person will be good. Yeah.
So this is a great thing that you bring up, right? Like, are the resumes the right data to be dumping into your algorithm to predict it? Now, if Watson's doing this, it's obviously finding some correlation between some data points in the resume and the people that you hire. But what you're saying here is like, look, the important stuff is not what's in that, right? It's these other things that I figure out. And so if you're going to build the right algorithm, and this is what we do in my lab, is like we go talk to people and say, all right, tell me all the things that you consider, right? Even if it's stuff that like can't be captured in a resume or social media. So you just maybe like, look, the guy made good eye contact. right? Like that could be, I don't know, or it has a good handshake, right? Like when I was growing up, my dad always yelled at, he'd make us like awkwardly practice handshakes, right?
Nice. How's your handshake now?
It's great. Yeah, it's really good. It worked. It worked. It stuck.
Thank you, Dad.
Yeah. Thank you, Dad. But yeah, so if, there are these kinds of things, right?
So you should say for Father's Day tomorrow.
Thank you for teaching me to do a good, proper handshake. I'll try to stick that in the card. But yeah, so, the handshake one might be hard. But what we try to do is find ways like, okay, how can we get at these kinds of features based on the data that we're able to access? So we kind of roughly approximate the things that you would say are important with the data that we have. And sometimes it's a really rough approximation, but we try to capture that as much as possible. So that's what goes into the algorithm. And then the algorithm can find relationships between the things you think matter with the people that you hire. And so it might be that, your social media profile, your resume, that's not capturing the things you care about. If you're getting the right people to make your algorithms, they're going to first ask you what you care about and build that data and then put that into the algorithm.
So a couple of years ago when we spoke, I had asked the question of, because I, for the last 20 years, I'd call people to see if they were interested in a job. And occasionally it was the absolute right day that the person got yelled at by their boss, or they know that the company's going out of business, and it was a perfect time. And that was critical. The best time to call someone is the best time to call someone. So how could I do that? And you were talking to me about that, and you said, well, what you need to do is you need to have a database, and you need to call 1,000 people. And you need to ask the question of, was this the right time to call you?
Yeah.
And get their Twitter handle, and maybe one other question. And then, follow it through. Right?
Yeah.
And see if it was the right time to call them. And that's simple.
It's that simple. So we've talked about there's two things that you need, right? The algorithms, the math, that's all there. And so if you want to build one of these algorithms that predicts some kind of creepy thing, all you need is what's the data that we're going to put in. And figuring that out is a research problem. That's hard, but you want to figure out what's the data that we're going to put in. If you have Twitter, we're going to grab all this stuff from Twitter. If you say, these three things are important to me, we'll say, well, how could we kind of estimate that from Twitter? Let's come up with some stuff. So that's one thing. What's the data that goes in? The second thing is what's the right answer? Because you have to teach these algorithms how to separate the people that it's the right time for from the people that it's not, or the people who develop postpartum depression from the people who don't. So yeah, if you wanted to do this, find a bunch of people, find some that it was the right time for and some that it wasn't, find a data source, say Twitter, and then work with some researchers to figure out what do we dump in from Twitter, and that's going to let you build an algorithm that will do the prediction. I know from people I've talked to who have worked with LinkedIn on this that the best predictor is the day you update your resume on LinkedIn.
Right.
Is the right day to call you.
Right, but they don't show that. Now, they do show that on Monster. On Monster, they actually say what's the date that this person updated their profile, and you can sort by the day that people updated their profile most recently.
Yeah.
So your profile could be on there for years, but if you updated it last week, you'll come up to the top.
So that could be a good source to look at. LinkedIn tends to keep their data pretty close in because they make money on helping you with these kinds of analytics, which is why there's not a lot of academic research on LinkedIn because we can't get that data.
So what are some of the things that you're seeing in the workspace? What do people need to be concerned about?
So most of these algorithms, the kind of things we're talking about, these really big data algorithms, haven't quite made it into the workplace yet. The few places that you're seeing them are things like what we call recommender systems, the Netflix, Amazon, Pandora, suggesting stuff to you. Facebook and Google, obviously, they have huge amounts of data about all of us, and they use this to help target ads at you. But that's about it in terms of how this has reached industry so far. But it's coming, right? There's a lot of companies that are gearing up to do this. The only hindrance towards building a company that's going to run these algorithms and sell these insights is their ability to get the data, which is really easy, right? They just need to spend the money to get the data and build the database. So 3-ish years, maybe 5 years, this is going to be a much more common thing.
So some of the applications, and I want you to continue, but some of the applications I can see is that if I was the head of HR, I'd want to know if people are really happy. And those surveys that people get are horrible at predictors. They're really not good. If I can find some other data, I don't know what it would be. Maybe their emails, that they send throughout the company, those kinds of things, that I could then get a sense of, are people really having a good time? Like, when do people's emails start falling off? Is it 3:00 on Friday?
Right.
Or is it 6:00 on Friday? Do people get in at 8:00 on Monday or 10:00 on Monday?
Yeah. And there's a ton of tools that would support this kind of analysis, right? So if that's what you care about. Yeah. I mean, most companies, if you use company email, have the right to search it. I mean, legally, they certainly do.
Yeah.
And most companies are explicit, like, look, we're going to look at whatever your emails are in the company system.
Yeah, I worked at a company that had a keylogger on my keyboard.
Oh, yeah.
So everything I typed in was logged.
Yeah.
Everything.
So if you have all that data, right? So there's a whole creepy factor that we're going to kind of put aside. But if you have all that data, there's a ton of language analysis tools, which we use in lots of these algorithms, that can look at what kind of happy words, what type of positive emotions, how much are you talking about anxiety? Are you talking about family and kind of personal things? Are you talking about work and money kind of things? These are really interesting tools. You can try some of these out as well. This is a little too hard to try on the smartphone because it requires a lot of copying and pasting. But there's one you can test out called Receptivity.
Is that receptivity.com?
I think .com or .net. If it ends in an I, and if you Google that, you'll find it. It's built by people who built a lot of the academic tools that we use. And you can paste in your text. You can test it out on yourself.
Really? So I can just put in like a bunch of text and see what it says?
Yeah. Copy your Facebook posts or essays that you've written, and it will do a analysis of you. It'll give you something similar to what we saw in the examples that we tried, but it will also highlight different categories of words that you use. And so that's a tool. You can buy commercial access to that now. That will it'll do things like personality traits and thinking style and that kind of stuff, some of what we talked about. So if you're a company and you want to do this and you have all of your employees' emails, you can buy access to Receptivity, send everybody's email up there, get a profile back on everyone. They're a pretty recent startup. It's maybe a couple years that they've been around.
Right.
But that's something that you can do today. I don't know if you're worried about it, right? This is your original question. What do you do? What should you be worried about? There's not a lot you can do, right? People have access to your data, and these algorithms are going to work on the data, and there's nothing you can do to stop people from running it through.
And so culturally, right, we're kind of at the beginning of a new creepy thing.
Indeed.
Because it could be really good, right? I mean, your doctor could know if you have postpartum depression.
But your boss could run that algorithm too, right? To tell if you're going to develop postpartum depression when you're ready to come back to work, and you might not want that to happen. Right,
or they may say, oh, Lorne's having a bad day today. I should be extra nice.
Yeah, that would be good.
It's like every day. I should bring them a cup of coffee today.
Yeah.
I mean, those kinds of things. It could be, so, obviously this is people, right?
Yeah.
And I guess the intention's got to be good, right? It's got to be for the benefit of the person. I think if things start happening where the data is used to fire people,
it has been, yeah.
It has.
Yeah. So in that book that I mentioned, Weapons of Math Destruction, they have a great example from here in Washington, D.C., where the D.C. public schools used this algorithm to rank teachers. We don't know how it does it. We don't know what the inputs are. We don't know how it scored it. They won't say. But they basically ranked all the teachers. They fired the bottom 250. And one woman who everybody, teachers, students, parents, thought she was great, was in that list. She didn't know why. She appealed it. They wouldn't tell her, wouldn't hire her back. And she was, I think, unemployed for 3 days and then got hired out in the Virginia suburbs at, some rich school. So it is absolutely being used in potentially unfair ways to fire people already. And we should be worried about
Well,
that.
It's not just unfair to her, but it's a bad business decision.
That's right. This is
and if it was her, I'm sure there was others that didn't deserve to get fired.
Because they're wrong, right?
Yeah.
The algorithms are wrong. So say we fire 20% of people who actually shouldn't have been fired. That's a terrible thing to do, to be firing great teachers in an urban under-resourced school district.
And if it's one, we don't know how many it was.
That's right. We don't know. That's right. We don't know.
It could be half. It could be 70%.
And they won't say, right? They're very closed off about the algorithms and how they work and what decisions they made. So we are starting to see that, and it's done unfairly. And the problem now, of course, is that you don't have any recourse, right?
But now, well, that's actually not exactly true, right? There's the EEOC laws. There's you have these civil rights acts, right?
Yeah.
You can't fire people, certain classes of people. So people over 40, women, without a really good reason. So if this data that, like, if they fired all these people and they have to be in a protected class, these folks have a case. They can file an EEO complaint.
Yeah,
and then the EEO, I mean, that'll be really interesting because the EEO then would come and investigate it, and then they'd probably have to see the data.
But for this to work, of course, you need some evidence that it's systematically addressing one of those groups.
Well, you'd have to look at the 250.
Yeah.
So if that population was somehow skewed to mostly women or mostly African Americans, I mean, and there's no justification for it because they probably don't have justification for it, I would imagine.
I think that's right.
Because no human did it. It was done by a machine.
It's done by a machine. And I think the people who are using the machine don't understand the algorithms either. Yeah. Now, we have seen cases. Wells Fargo had a big settlement where they had an algorithm that was determining mortgage rates, which you're not allowed to use race as a factor in that. And the algorithm didn't look at race, but it looked at zip code, which very closely maps to race. And it turns out it was giving subprime mortgages unfairly to Hispanics and African Americans who could have a perfect credit record, but because they come from a zip code that tends to be a lower socioeconomic status, they're getting these really high interest rates when their credit history is perfect. And they had a big fine for that. But the algorithms can have these unfair results in non-biased ways, right? Where it's not any of these protected classes who are specifically targeted. The algorithms just have some problems. And in that case, what can you do about it?
It seems like what they should have done at the school is taken that data, those 200 or so people, and then used a couple of other screens.
That's right.
To validate it.
That's right. Talk to the principals, talk to the students.
Like, what do you think of this person, and then get a rougher sense of, like, is this right?
And that's the right way to do it, right? That's why I come back, we call these decision support systems, not decision-making systems. You should never just rely on the algorithm. And when you do, you see unfair things happening.
Right. Even the derivatives market, right? Those were all created by algorithms, and it created a big mess.
That's right. Yeah. There's, I have none of these fears that Stephen Hawking has that artificial intelligence is going to take over society. It's bad, right? I'm an artificial intelligence researcher, and artificial intelligence kind of sucks. Like, it can do some really good things, but it's wrong a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And if you ever watch these systems where you just kind of let it go in the wild, all kinds of bad stuff happens. So we really need humans involved in all these decision-making points. The algorithms can help, and they can give you really useful insights, but that's all that they should be doing for most of these decisions.
My name is Lorne Epstein. I'm your host, and I've been talking to Jennifer Golbeck. Jennifer, thank you so much for talking to us today about this stuff. This is really fascinating. I just looked at the clock, and the show time is gone.
It's been super fun.
It's been super fun. So how can folks find you, and what have you done recently, and you're available for speaking? What can people do to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I'm at jengolbeck.com on the web, or Jen Golbeck on Twitter. That will give you everything about me. But yeah, speaking and consulting, you can take my classes at the University of Maryland.
Cool.
I'm really easy to Google.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And thank you so much for listening to another episode of You're Hired. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein. You're listening to 96.7 FM, and we'll see you next week here on Monday, 10 a.m.